DLSS 5 is cheating, and that's the problem. Today we're talking about DLSS 5, and I know how this sounds to some of you already. Cheating? It's a graphics setting, but that's exactly the point. DLSS 5 isn't just a setting, it's not just upscaling, it's not just more frames. DLSS 5 is NVIDIA basically walking up to the concept of a video game frame and saying, yep, that doesn't need to be real anymore. And if that sentence makes you uncomfortable, well, good, because that's actually the debate. This is one of those rare topics where the comments split down the middle. Half of you are going to say, this is the future, stop being dramatic, and the other half are going to say, this is AI slap and it's ruining gaming. And what makes this perfect is that most people arguing about it don't even know what DLSS 5 actually does. They're arguing vibes, they're arguing fake frames versus who cares, without understanding where the frame comes from. What gets rendered, what gets inferred, what gets predicted, and what that does to your input response. So today I'm going to explain what DLSS 5 actually is in normal language for us to understand. Then I'm going to argue both sides, and then I'm going to land on a take. Because here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. This changes gaming forever, and that terrifies me. This is Mavro, and welcome to Fossil Entertainment. Well, I hope you enjoy then. First, let's establish what DLSS is and why DLSS 5 is different. For years, the basic deal was simple. Your GPU renders a frame at a lower resolution and DLSS uses AI to reconstruct a higher resolution image. That's what most people think DLSS is, upscaling. But NVIDIA has been stacking DLSS into a whole suite of tricks. Super resolution, ray reconstruction, frame generation, now multi-frame generation, where the GPU isn't just rendering and upscaling, it's rendering some frames and generating others. NVIDIA's own DLSS technology page describes DLSS multi-frame generation as using AI to generate up to 5 frames per rendered frame, powered by RTX 50 series GPUs and 5th generation Tensor cores. That's not me being dramatic, that's literally how they're selling it. Check this out. And NVIDIA's developer documentation repeats that same idea. AI can generate up to 5 frames per rendered frame on RTX 50 series and RTX Pro Blackwell GPUs. Now, if you're a normal person hearing that, your first reaction is going to be, wait, so the GPU isn't rendering most frames? Correct. Good job. That's the core of the argument, and DLSS 5 takes it even further because DLSS 5 isn't just about frames. NVIDIA is describing DLSS 5 as a real-time neural rendering model that infuses pixels with photoreal lighting and materials, bridging rendering and reality. That's NVIDIA's language. NVIDIA's press release also says DLSS 5 arrives in the fall and calls it their biggest graphics breakthrough since real-time ray tracing in 2018. So, we've crossed the line. Okay? We are not just reconstructing resolutions anymore. We're now infusing visual information into the image that wasn't necessarily there in the original render the way traditional pipelines work. And that's why the debate got so spicy. Now, let's slow down and define the cheating accusations properly, because people abuse that word a lot. When most gamers say cheating, they mean one of two things. They either mean competitive cheating like wall hacks and aimbots, yes, or they mean you didn't earn that performance. DLSS 5 isn't an aimbot, obviously, but it absolutely hits the second definition because DLSS 5 lets you present performance and image quality that you didn't brute force render in the classic sense. And that breaks people's brains because the industry has trained us for decades that real performance means real frames. It means your GPU rendered those frames. The word existed, it was shaded, it was lit, it was output. DLSS 5 says we can render fewer true frames and generate more perceived frames. We can also use a neural model to stabilize and enhance lighting or material details in real time based on the inputs we have. If you're a purist, that is hearsay. Upper heard. If you're a normal gamer with a 144Hz monitor who just wants the game to feel smooth, it sounds like heaven. So let's argue the anti-DLSS side first because that's where the controversy lives. Here's why people call DLSS 5 cheating, because it changes the meaning of the frame rate number. When a game says 180 FPS, you assume something, that the game produced 180 unique real-time frames based on user input, simulation state, and rendering output. With multiple frame generation, that number can include a lot of frames that are not rendered in the traditional sense. They are inferred from previous frames, motion vectors, and the engine's data. Again, NVIDIA says this outright. They're proud of it. They say DLSS multi-frame generation can generate up to 5 frames per rendered frames. So if someone buys a GPU based on a benchmark headline that says 240 FPS and a huge chunk of those frames are generated, the purest argument is you didn't actually get 240 FPS. You got a smoother animation stream, but you didn't get the same input-driven simulation updates per second. And this is where the competitive argument shows up. Because in competitive shooters, what matters isn't just what you see. It's what the game is doing under the hood and how fast your inputs translate into on-screen response. If generated frames make the screen look smoother but don't reduce input to photon latency in the same way real rendering does, then the 240 FPS number is misleading if you don't treat it like classic FPS. Now, NVIDIA will respond by pointing to reflex and low latency integration, and they often pair frame generation messaging with reflex as part of the solution. NVIDIA's DLSS 4.5 dynamic multi-frame generation write-up also emphasizes that they combine multi-frame generation with reflex to minimize responsiveness impact. But the skepticism doesn't disappear because gamers have eyes. They've seen frame generation artifacts, they've seen warping on HUD elements, ghosting on fast-moving objects, shimmering on fine detail. They've felt that subtle disconnect where the animation looks smoother than the control feels. So when DLSS 5 shows up and say we're generating even more frames, the fear becomes if there's any mismatch between what you're seeing and what you're controlling, then we've created a new kind of fake smoothness. And fake smoothness, especially in competitive context, feels like a lie. Not because it's malicious, but because it's a different category of output and the industry still market it using the same old FPS language. That's why it's categorized as cheating, because it's moving the goalposts while still pretending the scoreboard means the same thing. Now, let's talk about the second reason people hate this. It's philosophical and it's the one that makes the comment explode, the AI slap argument. DLSS 5 is not just rendering a lower res image and sharpening it. NVIDIA describes DLSS 5 as a real-time neural rendering model that takes a frame's color and motion vectors and infuses the scene with photoreal lighting and material anchored to source 3D content. So the question people are asking is simple. If an AI model is deciding what the lighting and material detail should look like, at what point are you no longer looking at the game's art? At what point is it the game's art filtered through NVIDIA's taste? Because, make no mistake, neural rendering models have bias. They have tendencies. They push images toward what they think looks right. That can be amazing, but it can also blur stylistic intent. If you're playing a gritty, noisy, intentionally stylized game and the model cleans it up, are you still seeing the developer's intended output? That's the existential fear. And the reason this debate is raging is because it's not just about performance anymore, it's about authorship. It's about whether future games will be designed around AI reconstruction and AI generation rather than raw rendering. And to be frank with all of you, yes, that's actually scary. Okay, now let's be fair because the pro DLSS side also has a strong argument. The pro DLSS argument is basically stop romanticizing brute force. Games have been using fake techniques forever. That's not an insult. That's literally what computer graphics is. We use temporal anti-aliasing, we use motion blur, we use reconstruction, we use upscaling, we use interpolation in video, we use tricks because the goal isn't to suffer. The goal is to get a better result at a playable cost. And DLSS is just the next evolution of that. If DLSS 5 lets you run higher settings, higher ray tracing, higher path tracing, higher resolution targets without needing a nuclear reactor in your PC, then it's not cheating. It's progress. NVIDIA positions DLSS 5 as their biggest breakthrough since ray tracing and says it enables photoreal visual fidelity previously only achieved in Hollywood VFX, but now in real time. And NVIDIA's own DLSS 5 announced at GTC post says DLSS 5 is launching this fall and frames it as a major step forward. So from that perspective, DLSS 5 is like saying, do you want games to look insane or do you want to die on the hill of only brute force frames count? Because here's the ugly reality. Modern rendering is expensive. Ray tracing is expensive. Path tracing is extremely expensive. We are quickly approaching a world where the only way to do truly next level lighting and geometry at high refresh rates is to cheat somehow. The question isn't should we cheat, the question is which cheat produces the best outcome. And that's why NVIDIA is betting so hard on neural rendering. Now, let's talk about the thing nobody wants to admit. DLSS 5 doesn't just change gaming. It actually also changed marketing. Because if frame generation can inflate performance metrics in a way that's hard for the average buyer to understand, then the GPU war shifts from how powerful is your chip to how convincing is your AI. That's where the trust problem comes in. The industry already has a trust problem. Players are tired of marketing that feels like deception. So when DLSS 5 shows up and you get these headlines like this card gets 240 FPS in path traced games, what players are really asking is how much of that is real rendering, how much is generation, how much is reconstruction, how much of this is it looks smooth but doesn't feel the same. And the worst part is you can be technically honest and still mislead people. You can say 240 FPS and technically it's true as output frames, but if the player is imagining 240 unique simulation driven frames, that's a mismatch. That mismatch is what creates backlash. So here's my actual take, and I'm going to try to land this cleanly. DLSS 5 is not cheating in the sense that it's wrong. DLSS 5 is cheating in the sense that it breaks the old contract. The old contract was your GPU rendered the frames you see. DLSS 5 says your GPU renders less and AI fills in the rest, and the output can be better for most people. That's not inherently bad, that's inevitable. The problem is what happens next, because once you normalize the idea that most frames are generated, studios will start designing around it. They'll start shipping games that assume frame generation is the default. They'll start shipping games that are less optimized at native because everyone has DLSS. And if you've been gaming long enough, you already know how that ends. It ends with just turn on DLSS being the new just wait for the patch. It ends with native becoming a second-class citizen. It ends with the baseline experience getting worse because the industry expects AI to cover up the gaps. That is actually the nightmare scenario. And it's not sci-fi. It's a natural incentive structure of modern AAA. DLSS 5 changes gaming forever because it makes the AI path the easiest path. And that terrifies me because whenever the easiest path exists, the industry actually takes it. Hello everyone, so I'm going to make this quick, just a quick pause. If you like these kinds of breakdowns where we actually explain the tech and then talk about the implications, subscribe. And do me a favor for the algorithm, just comment cheating if you think DLSS 5 is fake frames and fake gaming, or comment progress if you think people are being dramatic. Either way, it helps push the video and it can make us continue making this kinds of video. So yeah, so what do we do with this? We stop being lazy about the conversation. We don't just scream AI slap without understanding what it is. We don't just scream it's the future without acknowledging the trade-offs. DLSS 5 can be incredible. It can also be abused as an excuse. DLSS 5 can make games more accessible for people who can brute force 4K path tracing. It can also become a crutch that encourages studios to ship less optimized work. Both things can be actually true. And that's why this debate is going to keep raging, because it's not just about visual, it's about what real even means in gaming now. And once that door opens, you don't close it. You just decide whether you walk through it with honesty or with marketing. Now, I want to hear from you. Would you rather play a game at 90 real FPS native or 180 FPS with multi-frame generation if it looks smoother but doesn't feel identical? Do you think DLSS 5 is the future of graphics or the beginning of the end of real rendering? Drop your takes in the comments, like the video if you enjoyed the breakdown, subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one. Make sure to stay safe and drink your water. See ya!